graduated in 1992.
Okay, and what kind of current events or newsworthy things that were going on during the time you were in high school kind of influenced how you acted?
So a couple of things took place during that time, and I took some notes and did some research, and it all came back to me. A big one during the time of my high school days was the coming down of the Berlin Wall. That was really a significant moment when I was a freshman, and the hallways were very into that and very much recognized the importance of that with East Germany and West Germany merging. So I would say the Berlin Wall coming down, Desert Storm, that was really my first exposure to a war. I was born at the end of the Vietnam War, so I really didn't experience that. So this was the first experience with what was going on in the Middle East and why we went there, and I learned about Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and what all that meant. And in addition, the last thing would be Nelson Mandela being released from prison. Those were three big historical events that happened when I was in high school. And really kind of opened my eyes to the world outside of this Scotch Plains community and what was going on in Europe and what was going on in South Africa and what was going on in the Middle East. So we didn't have global perspectives during that time. It was world history, US history, so there was no global awareness. But I would say that was the first time I really realized what was beyond these walls in this community.
I graduated in 2003. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is obviously 9/11. It was one of the first days of school. I was sitting in the gym bleachers. We were waiting to pick our classes for gym, and I just remember somebody coming in and being like, a plane just hit one of the Twin Towers. And it didn't make sense. And then as the day went on, more and more information came out. It was really creepy because a lot of the kids in school were getting pulled out of school by their parents. So by the end of the day, you go to classes, half the kids aren't there. You don't really know what's going on. Then I remember afterwards, that night I went up to the soccer field and met with a couple friends, and we looked up, and there's probably, I would say, at least 150 planes in the sky just like patrolling the area, just all over the place. And when I think of like days that impacted my high school career, that's obviously the one that sticks out. And then everything that happened after that with all the fallout of stuff. It was kind of an uncertain time. We were going to war. I was 16 years old, and I didn't know if I was going to get drafted. I didn't know what was going to happen. So that, they say that the world changes, but the world literally changed after 9/11.
I graduated in 2005. One of the biggest things looking back to my senior year was September 2001, when the planes hit the World Trade Center towers. And I remember being in school that day, and teachers talking about it, students making phone calls, and I had friends with parents that lived in the city, and there was a lot of unknowingness, like what was happening, what was going on, and it was scary. And I feel like that moment, you really saw, teachers and students really coming together. And through the aftermath, the support and the help, and it really shaped me in, understanding how, you have to be there for other people, you have to be there for your friends, your classmates. The teachers are there, the community's there, just how everyone came together. It really showed you how much this town cares about you as a student, as a person, and how strong we can stay together through tough times. So that was honestly a big moment in my high school career that I'll never forget. I remember I was walking in between classes when I first heard about it. I was walking actually by the Decca store when we used to have the Decca store here. And I was stopping in to grab something before class, and I remember hearing about it. And every time I pass now, as I work here at Scotch Plains, every time I pass by that hallway, every time I pass by that Decca store door, I get images of what I felt. And this is on a daily basis, I recall that.
I graduated in 2013. Well, I remember in 2012, Obama got elected for a second term, so that was a big deal. And I remember, like, it was also around the same time that gay marriage was legalized throughout, like, the country. There's a lot of things going on in high school, and I think we were all very hopeful for the future at that point. And it was nice back then.
I will be graduating in 2018. The Trump's election, that really helped me define who I was politically and really inspired me to get more involved in politics, and I'm going to be minoring in it in college, so that definitely shaped me. All of the school shootings over the past 2-3 years, even like back to Newtown, that kind of shaped me. It kind of makes you scared to go to school, to be like, oh, am I gonna get killed next? So that definitely shaped me.
All right, and how do you feel about this new security in the school, and do you approve of it? Are you indifferent to it?
I feel like the new security is just not gonna do anything. Like, maybe the screening people at the front, that's the best idea I can think of, but like only being allowed to leave through door 12 and door 1, like nobody follows that to begin with. And even if people did, what would it do? Like, you could monitor it through security cameras, but if you're leaving the school, is it like really that big a deal? So that doesn't make sense. The fact that everything is locked makes sense, but it's more just a hassle for everybody instead, because like for a lot of music stuff, sometimes equipment is left in the auditorium, and we either have to go get keys from a janitor or from Mr. Thomas, and it just creates more hassle for everybody since it's always locked. So I think it's okay, but not that effective.
And how did pop culture influence you? Music, styles of the time? Like, what were your interests?
So styles of the time were very varied. It was really, I was still into that because I entered high school in 1988. And so we were still in sort of that 80s pop mode with like Madonna and the big hair and Janet Jackson, and Michael Jackson was huge, Duran Duran, and then we started to move into the 90s, and when I got into the 90s, it was more house music and dance music and break dancing and a lot of flash, a lot of that fluorescent colors, the roll-up jeans, the EG socks we used to wear, the leg warmers. The hair was very big back in those days, so I think being a part of the late 80s to the early 90s, it really just kind of carried, and we tended to go back and forth between the 80s and 90s. 90s was sort of becoming a little bit more what we thought was hip during that time, and the Madonna phase sort of faded out once we got to high school. It was more middle school.
I was really into punk rock. I spent a lot of my time going to concerts. I probably went to like 1 or 2 concerts a month with my friends. The music scene in the high school is a lot bigger than it was today. There's probably like 5 or 6 bands that played regularly around town. So if I wasn't going to like a real concert in New York or down at the Birch Hill, which is an old folks retirement community now, or I was going to like a lot of local shows. There's a couple Battle of the Bands every year that they had. They had Battle of the Bands in the auditorium. They had Battle of the Bands downtown on the stage at the Village Green. So the music scene outside of like school-produced music, like student-produced music, was a lot bigger back then. And I did. That's kind of where I identified and where I spent most of my time.
So you'd say over time, kids in high school stopped making bands or stopped performing? It's become less common?
It seems like that's the case. I currently advise the Battle of the Bands, and every year it's like there's like a couple bands here or there, but a lot of times it's a couple kids who play guitar and bass, and they're like, oh, maybe we'll throw something together for the Battle of the Bands this year, as opposed to like going there like like when I was in high school, like I knew the bands that were going to play, and I also knew some like the songs that they already wrote. Like everybody kind of knew the songs that the bands made. If they came out with new songs, like it was a big deal. And I mean, this is like digital recording and stuff like that was just starting to, come about too. So it was a lot easier for people to like write songs, record them in their basement, and post them onto their like MySpace page or their Pure Volume page, and like release songs like that. So yeah, it definitely was bigger. I mean, I know that there's kids who are like SoundCloud rappers now, but I don't think it's that. The community of the music back then is a lot different than the community of music right now, I would say.
In high school, I was the student that was, involved in athletics. I was involved in football, wrestling, track and field. So I was almost like I am now. I was usually wearing workout clothes. In music, I was into, Bruce Springsteen was a big fan. I was into rock music, anything that could get the mind going, get me all fired up. I was listening to that. With the school, I was I wouldn't call myself really super popular, but I got along with a lot of people. I was friendly, I was nice. So I hung out with, so many different students. I had my main crew that, played sports with me. Every morning, I was a good student. So every morning, like school started, 8:08 classes start. I didn't have AM class. But I would still get here about 7:30 in the morning. Me, my good friends, Dan Picola would be there, Dan LaForge would be there, Chris Fine would be there. We'd go hang out in the cafeteria every morning. We'd be sitting there. We'd probably stop at Family Bagel beforehand, picked up a pork roll, egg and cheese, orange juice, milk. We'd be sitting there. We'd be working on homework, hanging out. People would be coming in. We'd all be hanging out. There'd probably be 20, 30 people hanging out in the cafeteria just before school started, just hanging out, doing some work, eating breakfast, throwing jokes around. It was a fun time. It was a great sense of togetherness.
Well, I remember when I was in high school, around freshman or sophomore year, that's when I first started seeing like a real rise in like EDM and electronic music. I remember dubstep was really big, like obnoxious dubstep. Like my friends and I would go on these like weird forums and websites trying to find like these gems out of just like loads and loads of crappy dubstep remixes. And I just remember that being the beginning of like, I don't know, you see now like people spend like $500 to go to like Electric Adventure or Izu or whatever. And I remember like that wasn't a thing when I was in high school, but I remember seeing the beginnings of it and like such a big thing in college now and like even high schoolers do it.
I listen to a lot of like rap music and stuff. That's pop culture. Like movies like Infinity War and things like that. That's the most recent one. Has like, it's always a big topic of discussion. You can always it's the idea of like shared cultural experience. You can always talk about it with people, and same with rap music and things like that. You always find people who like the same things as you, and you can always talk about that with them. And for big things like Infinity War and rap music, stuff like that, it's everybody. So those pop culture things have kind of like, I guess it's kind of shaped me, because I mean, it's like building the social aspect of life. So
Yeah, so you're trying to say like with the boom of interest, like the amount of clicks has expanded and everybody's finding their own little path?
Yeah.
And how did like the day-to-day school life work? Like how are the teachers? Like how do you think they compare to teachers now and like teaching styles now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So technology, I think, was slowly starting to integrate into the building, but whenever we used technology, it was only in the computer lab, and typically it was for something special, like a project, we didn't even use it for research because we didn't have the internet. So I would say technology was only used on an occasion, and it was special. In the classroom, it was definitely more lecture-focused group work. There's no Chromebook cart in the classroom. There was no internet, no cell phones, none of that. I remember really having to be very organized because we just had a lot of dittos. There was like a lot of paper. Everything was done on paper. If I had a type of paper, it was done on a word processor or a really old Apple computer that was just a word processor. There was no internet or anything like that. The teaching was definitely a lot of lecture. And more getting to know your classmates as you worked as a group, as opposed to individual work. I had Mr. Moulter, so it was definitely a lot like him. Lecture-based, taking notes, paper and pen.
Day to day, I don't think it's that much different. We have the same exact schedule as when I went to high school. Academically, I was an average student. I wasn't, I wasn't top of the class by any means. I was like I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I was kind of struggling to, I wouldn't even say I was struggling to find my place in the world. I just wasn't really considering it. Like, I was just getting through high school to get through high school, and knew I was going to go to college and didn't have much of a future in mind. I just knew that, like, I liked music.
How do you think the teaching methods differ from, like, back then when you were in high school and, like, today when you're teaching now?
I have no idea. No, that's a lie. I think it's a little bit more student-centered now. I think that your the projects that you're doing is more based around the student, and there's less preaching by the teachers today, and more like student-oriented and student-centered, class and project development.
That's a great question, because students always ask me that, what it was like when I was here versus teaching now. A big difference I believe is, a lot of the time when I was in high school, it was mainly like sitting in your desks, the teacher on the board, I'm scrambling to write notes, and again, I don't teach other subjects, so I can't say that it's not like this in the other classes, but I know that the way I teach was I learned from those classes. I learned from what I was taught at the College of New Jersey, and as education has developed, a lot more now is student-centered, where there's a lot more student-driven assignments, students working together to teach material to other students. We weren't really doing a ton of that when I was in high school. So that's a big, huge difference. And I believe I like this style that I'm doing now a lot more, because before it was, taking notes, I'm daydreaming, I'm almost falling asleep, and then I'm moving on to my next class, versus now where, I make my classes, there's constantly stuff going on, we're constantly moving, and there's constantly variations into what we're doing.
Pretty much the same. It's high school, but one thing that I remember that you guys didn't have to deal with was the cell phone policy. I remember getting in trouble a lot for texting in the hallway, which doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. At least I think not. And I also remember there was like an ID policy where you had to wear an ID at all times, or else you would get written up and get a detention. And I remember getting like 2 or 3 detentions for not wearing my ID, which is ridiculous. Yeah.
How would you describe the day-to-day school life? Like, what do you rely on for your education? Who do you rely on for your education?
For my education, like, what I rely on would definitely be like the internet, because teachers are great and everything, but sometimes there's just a problem that you either don't know how to solve because you can't remember like the notes, or you can't remember the lecture, or your notes aren't good enough, that type of thing. Or sometimes there's just stuff that you're really stuck on, and if you look it up, that's easy. So I feel like what would be the internet and who would definitely be my friends and a few teachers, because like if you're having trouble with one aspect of like math or whatever, it's likely that one of your friends is either having trouble on the same thing or not at all, so that you can either work together to solve it, or they can help you understand it and help you learn it. So I feel like who would definitely be my friends.
Okay, how do you think that teaching styles or paths will grow like in the future? Say 10 years from now, how do you think teaching right now is going to be teaching from different than from teaching?
I think teaching in like 10 years will definitely be more personal. Like teachers will be more like people instead of like the monotone robot who stands at the front of the room and reads the notes. I feel like as that, I mean, I can tell you that has more success with me. So I feel like as people start to understand that that approach to teaching has more success, it'll grow.
And do you just, as last notes, do you have any like stories from you in high school that you remember you just like to share?
It's interesting because as I've worked here and I just had my 25th reunion, there are things that still are the same. Like I feel like the building's the same, the schedule's still the same. There are things that haven't changed. I would say though the things that have shifted is, as I was looking through the yearbook, is that homecoming used to be a really big deal here. There was a parade down the center of town. It was always the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We had a bonfire. It was huge. And so I guess that part of me is a little sad because I don't see it as big as it was 25 years ago. And I think with student schedules, have shifted to after school activities that are different than what I had. And so the coming together as a community was certainly something I remember, particularly at homecoming. That was a really big deal back 25 years ago in the day.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that the big thing, and this might be like news and culture wise was like everybody knows like the Zach Morris cell phone. Like, you know, the big clunky thing. Like, cell phones were definitely around before I got into high school. But, like, I remember in high school when, like, I didn't have a cell phone going into high school. I got one when I was a junior or senior, I don't remember. Cell phones weren't a thing. I remember, like, hearing the first custom ringtone of, like, I don't know, like, whatever the popular song is, NSYNC's Bye 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 or something like that. Maybe All the Small Things by Blink-182. And like, it wasn't even the real song, it was just like a MIDI version of it. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And like, I remember when like, I was able to take a picture, somebody was able to take a picture with a phone and show it to me immediately. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I remember downloading my first song off the internet. Like, all of that stuff happened while I was in high school. And it was really like a big technological boom after that. So I think the biggest difference between 2003 and 2018 is like the connectivity of everybody. Like everybody knows what's going on in everybody's lives. Everybody like it can constantly refresh and see in HD quality what whoever had for lunch, you know? Whereas, you know, like I remember trying to meet up with friends and say, hey, we'll meet here in 20 minutes, and then waiting there for 40 minutes and not knowing where freaking Timmy was because he was still at home, but we didn't have a cell phone to be like, Timmy, get over here, like trying to get a slice at Alfonso's. God. But I think like the biggest difference between today and then is definitely like cell phones and the internet.
You know, big ones I remember is, you know, first one, I mentioned it before, we're talking about the Deca store. Deca store used to be huge at Scotch Plains before they stopped it. So what the Deca store was was anybody that was involved in DECA, there was a part of the cafeteria that sold cookies, candy, sodas, water, everything. And during your lunch period, you would go there and you would work behind the DECA store. So students would come in there and you'd be helping them. I want skills, I want 2 cookies, I want 7 cookies, I want 10 cookies. And we'd be selling that. And so it's almost like you had like a little mini job. You weren't getting paid for it, but you could hang out back there and it was fun. So everybody involved with DECA was there. And when I was at Scotch Plains, Joe Franzone was the one that was in charge of DECA. And he just made it outstanding. A great teacher, one of my favorites looking back. So that's a big memory of mine, is being involved in DECA and how positive it was at Scotch Plains. Another one was, thinking back, right to my mind was homecoming. Homecoming was huge. For homecoming, we had the bonfire on the evergreen grass, huge bonfire. Community was out, everyone was there. It was usually before the Westfield football game we would do that. It was a huge rivalry. That was so much fun. I remember being on stage, being introduced. Then you have homecoming, everyone would be there. They'd be announcing the homecoming king, queen. I was nominated for that. I remember walking out. I walked out with who was nominated with me, Amber Sizemore. I think we both walked out together and, ended up, I didn't win. I believe it was Mike Baumwell. He placed first. He was homecoming king. I believe I was second in that running. I'm pretty sure we'll have to look back, but I'm almost 100% sure I placed second in there, so that was big. I'll talk about early on in my senior year. Senior year was huge. I decided to go out for class president. I felt like I was a good student. I knew a lot of people. I put up the posters, this and that. I did everything. I was making the speeches. Again, I believe I placed second. Mike Baumwell won again. So, 2 timeless. Mike's a great guy. But I believe I placed second for class president. So class president, homecoming king, second. So those are big memories for me. Another one I'll throw in there with Mr. Spiffy High. We still do Mr. Spiffy High now. I was involved with that. That was so much fun. Me and a couple friends. For my talent, I was rapping in Italian. I come from an Italian background. The whole Italian family's in town. The shoe repair shop in Scotch Plains, Park Ave Shoe Repair, that's my family's business. You go over there, it's all Italian in that place. So, I started rapping in Italian for my act. I had somebody come on stage with me and help me out. That was fun. Again, in that, I think I placed fourth. I didn't come in second. Mike Baumwell did not win. It was Matt Hassett, I believe, that placed in first. His act was he took boards, and was breaking them over his head. And I'll never forget it, because after one board and he couldn't break it, I remember whatever teacher was there ran out and told him to stop. Because what you're supposed to do when you're breaking boards is you're supposed to pre-cut them. He didn't pre-cut them. So he was trying to actually break boards over his head. And you can't do that. So that was awesome. He ended up winning that. I had another friend of mine, Steve Minio, big wrestler here. He placed fourth in the state, eighth in the state. What he did, I forget his act, but all I remember was he had when cheeseburgers from Burger King were $1, they were like 50-cent burgers from Burger King. He had a whole bag and he was throwing them out in the stands to everybody in the auditorium. That was awesome. So I think he placed, he got second. But those were just a couple of good memories. For me, placing in the state, for wrestling, just being around here. Listen, I love Scotch Plains. I love Scotch Plains Family High School. I don't think, it's awesome that I got hired here because I have so much passion here. People talk about bleeding blue. I actually bleed blue. This town for me means so much. Even though I don't live in Scotch Plains anymore, I live in Lincroft. But my family's still here, even if my family wasn't here. I have so many memories. That's why with wrestling as a coach now, we do a ton of community service. I reach out to the parents. I do a lot because this is what it's all about. I run the Olympic volleyball program here. I used to be in the Olympic volleyball program. For a couple years, we didn't have the championship game against the teachers. I brought that back. Why? Because it's awesome for the school and for the students and for everybody. So Scotch Plains does mean a lot to me. That's why I'm here. Before I got the job here, I'm not bragging, I had 3 other job offers at the same time as Scotch Plains. Here, I was offered at Clark, Northern Burlington. There was one more, I'm blanking off the top of my head. But I chose here. I chose here because I loved it here. I had teachers I remembered and just the moments, you know, to build from and to teach and to inspire and to motivate. That's what it's all about. So listen, the memories, I could keep going, but I would talk for another hour if I could.
I have like fond memories of like your friends, of my friends hanging out. Like, you don't understand in high school. High school is such like this little microcosm where you think that's the whole world. Like that's all that matters is high school. And so all those like moments with your friends, those are really important to you. But as you grow older and you realize that like your friends are doing their own things and you're growing up and drifting apart, like even my friends in college or my friends from work, we don't have that same relationship. So like, I don't know if there's one specific memory, but it's more just like that overall sense of like being in high school together. Like the only world that you know is high school, and that's kind of like unifying with all your friends. You just remember that.
Favorite memories, I mean, performing at States with Moonglowers, that like 2 months ago, that was awesome. Like that, there's a feeling that you can't beat doing that, listening to, or performing for 9 of the top jazz players, or 9 of the top jazz bands in New Jersey, and like doing well. Like that's one of the best feelings in the world. Probably marching band too, same thing. Performing at States and Nationals, that type of stuff.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
That's it.
Cool.